email just pops into your inbox, and you're just sort of like, what? Like, yeah, that I was there ready to close my email client down, and it was sort of like, what?
Hello, everybody. What a nice introduction to our 30 Days of Tool stream there.
Yeah.
So we had yesterday off. I was moving a lot of cardboard boxes and giant monster cutouts out of storage. What do you do, Mark?
Buying shoes for little one.
Very nice, very nice.
Rock and roll, rock and roll.
So we've got 4 to do today. We have limited time because we also have a workshop to deliver at midday. But we can't do the stream any earlier because we don't like getting up. So, it's harder to actually do and stream it any earlier than this. We probably should do it later, but other reasons. Anyway, so we've got 4 challenges to do. So let's get straight into it, I think, Mark.
Yeah, I think so.
So, day 16, which was Saturday, share your biggest frustration with testing tools. So I said we've got to be quick today, Mark, right? So
we've picked the one that we're going to talk for 45 minutes. Should we just not do the rest of the challenges today?
Yeah, Simon's support questions. What's one pet peeve in general? How as a community can we have greater empathy towards people behind the tool? So that's a very good anchoring point for us there. But also, how can we learn about these frustrations in a constructive way?
Yeah.
So, well, I think I know where I'd like to go.
I suspect I'm
going to go. And I think I know where you might go.
So, you go first.
Okay. I think my biggest frustration with testing tools, testing
tools made by Sean Connery,
is that they focus too much on automated checking, automated testing. As an industry, I understand why. As CEO of a business, right? I understand the need to make money and have income in a lot of other places. And right now, and it has been for many years, automation testing, checking is still very hot. And not enough companies are still doing it. A lot of companies aren't doing it very well, and there's huge opportunities in that space. But at the same time, it's kind of agreed as an industry that automation just doesn't happen, right? It doesn't come out of thin air. We don't just suddenly be like, oh, boom, these are the 50 scenarios we need to automate. There's lots of work that goes in prior to that. There's lots of exploration to get these ideas, to understand our systems. We talk about things like, reconning a system and trying to survey it to, get to know it. We talk about the importance of testability and automatability and, designing oracles. And there's so much stuff that happens before you can sit down and code or use a tool to record or whatever it is. A scenario. So for me, I get frustrated that there just isn't enough tools to really elevate exploratory testing. So not the recording of it, just to give you superpowers as you're doing it. Like that's what I would love.
I know what you mean, because we've been very lucky that we've been sought to give feedback on some tools before, and actually, the way that they've been sort of presented to us, it's like, this tool can do end-to-end testing, and it's sort of like, well, that first of all is a very saturated market, and it's great that you're doing that, but that's not super useful. Not super useful. I don't want to seem negative, but it's sort of, there's nothing new that I haven't already seen there. But then they show some sort of crazy spidering tool that will actually do sort of combined sort of fuzzing and sort of visual screen analysis and stuff to actually spider a site in a way that one that just does links does.
Yeah. And
it is frustrating because it's sort of like, actually, if you focused on that and pitched it that way, that'd be amazing. I'd use that every day in my tool set. So yeah, that sort of, it can be quite frustrating when you see people sort of talking about my tool's really good, but it's sort of like you're not looking at the right thing. But then I think that's kind of a lean principle in general.
Yeah.
My one, I don't know if I'm going to say what you think I'm going to say, but I'd say the word that summarizes it is feedback. So I get very frustrated with tools that when they are not behaving in the way that they should do, they don't either the tool itself does not communicate itself very well, or the community or support around it doesn't do a good job of communicating it. So some examples come to mind of. So I remember going through a real headache trying to use Webpack, and I found this error, and I just kept getting a random error that just told me nothing. It just kept going, not working, not working, not working, and that was irritating in and of itself. And I tweaked and stuff like that, and then I gave up, and I was like, all right, fine. Well, I'll go jump on the. I'll jump on Stack Overflow, and nobody responded. Then I went to Discord and was like, "Hey, Webpack people, I've created this Stack Overflow question about this thing," and no one replied to that as well. And in the end, I just gave up and just tore out the thing that was a problem, and I've still never come back to it. I remember when I know I've been talking about Pact in a sort of yay, it's great way and stuff, but the first time I used it, I couldn't get the Pact broker server, couldn't get it running, and it just kept failing. And it was me and I think Eddie Bruin. We spent an hour together trying to get it started, and it was basically something was missing in the configuration. But rather than actually sort of say, "Hey, this thing is missing," it just died silently. So those sort of things really, really wind me up. Also, just like typos, not being told that they're typos. Also wind me up. So I'd actually probably say that'd be a big thing.
Excellent. Well, let's have a quick. I can't talk today. Let's have a quick. I'm still doing it. Okay.
A quick click.
A quick look. So we've got Kelly Kenyon responding on this one. Biggest pet peeve: they're not easy to pick up. That's probably fair. We were talking about documentation the other day, and kind of the support that's out there for a lot of these tools can be a bit lacking sometimes. Yeah. In terms of an empathy, realise that they're probably, they're a tester too. They were probably struggling with this kind of things at one point. I think that's obviously fair. And we can learn by, using forums and community basically to support each other.
Yeah, and I would say like with my Pact example, is I came back to it a few years later, and that those issues had been addressed. And, it's an open source community. It's quite difficult because you want to get your core functionality sort of done first before you start expanding other things. So I understand sometimes when these weird things happen that people might not necessarily have the space and time to respond or handle.
Yeah, you caught me there just trying to make sure that we were streaming. And then I realised we were sharing. So you've got Anne Law.
Anne Law, she says, my biggest frustration when the tool is not working on my laptop. It is not working. Why? Is it my installation, my OSME? So yes, that was it. That was Pact broker for me the first time. It was literally the two of us just looking at my laptop going, why?
There was a nice pattern that came that's been relatively popular, but I would love everyone to take it up, is the idea of the doctor. I think Appium was the first time I'd seen the Appium doctor, which basically just checks a bit like a smoke test, really. You don't have this path set, you don't have this, you don't have that. And I've seen a few recently with I had a few issues the other day with Brew, and I had to run a few things in Brew, and it was commenting in the terminal telling me that maybe I should do this and do that. I think a bit more of that kind of thing is really useful.
We have that in RBP. I call them pre-flight checks. So it's sort of this isn't anything really to do with the application, but it's just making sure all your supporting stuff is there.
Yep. It probably falls back to the docs as well, like we chatting the other day. Clear instruction guides. It's very important.
What pet peeve with testing tools in general? How should use it? Can use it? Okay, I can do that, but is it its main purpose? Example, automation tool is the tool fitting right with my company test strategy. Yeah, you see, that's an interesting one, because that kind of goes back to the sort of how to be tool aware, how to sort of determine whether something's right or wrong. It's as much about understanding your problem and the context of your problem, as it is understanding what the tool can and can't do as well. But it is frustrating because when it doesn't work, like I said, it doesn't just go no. It becomes just painful and hard to use, and you can sometimes get stuck in that sunk cost fallacy of trying to get it to work when really you should just walk away.
It's interesting that though. I think there's definitely some opportunities for the tool, especially like commercial tools, really, with the idea of how you should use it, not how you can. Like, we were talking about the joys of some of the other tools that have, quite open APIs, right? So you can do anything with it. I mentioned that, tools that I might misuse or use for other purposes, like Selenium, for example. You can use it for many things, but like perhaps it's then taking a bit of a stance and saying, well, if you're going to be using it for this purpose, here's how you should structure your. I know it's a difficult thing to do because you kind of have to also believe in your, that stance. Like, you should. This is the best. I know I'm going to use the word, but that, when people say this is the best practice, that's kind of what they're trying to say. But sometimes those come across as like, this is how you will use it. Like, whereas like you should is probably a slightly more, not as firm as like a best practice.
I suppose if you frame it more as the author of the tool, of this is what I was hoping to achieve with this tool. This is what this is what the problem I was trying to sort of solve with this. Because I remember actually, Simon Stewart just talking about, he said something about Selenium when he was like, if you look at it, it's basically just the tool to interrogate an XML tree. And when you're like that, you're like, oh, well, when you bring it down to its, barest bones, you're like, oh, I see what it can and can't do in that sort of context as well.
Absolutely. So, because we've got a few more challenges, we're going to keep clicking through. We'll pull out a few things that Mickey's come back with. Pet peeve in general, there's just a lot to choose from. Again, kind of the inspiration behind 30 Days of Tools, we felt the same. It's the inspiration behind kind of the tool directory. Like, they all appear to have almost identical capabilities, but there will be subtle differences. And I think as a community and as these tool developers, it's about playing on that. Like we see a lot of the people compare yourselves to other tools. It's like, well, that's not really useful. Instead, show me why you're unique. Like, what's your USP? Like, because otherwise, why, like, they must know it internally. Otherwise, why are you raising money? Why are you developing? Why are you even trying? Like, you must have something that you believe is unique to your tool. So I think that's like definitely an annoying thing that they all tend to talk about the same things and not their USPs. Being able to take part in
I was just saying, and there's always like, rather than the like celebrating what it is that your tool does, a lot of language sometimes is attacking the other tools. So this tool lacks this, so therefore I did this, rather than sort of, I had this problem that I wanted to solve, and I found that this was the best solution for me. I'm putting it out there in the world to see what other people think, and hopefully they can get some value from it.
Yeah. And again, the greater empathy for people, I think this is definitely useful. Provide feedback if you get an opportunity to. If you say, it's really awkward sometimes because I do the same. And like when you get the emails about wanting to do surveys and get research and stuff, like I'm always like, oh yeah, I probably should, but I'm a bit busy. But then when I send them out from MOT, I'm like, why are people responding to this? Like, so. Again, I think the important thing there for me would be if you really care about that tool or that company or that community, etc. Try and find the extra few minutes just to chip in because they're probably trying to do something useful. Like they're not asking you to annoy you, like they're asking you because they've got they want your input to help them do the right thing.
And it's the same thing as like if there is that sort of accusation of well you're just repeating what X did. There's a good strong chances because that's never come into their world before, so it's sort of making that aware as well.
So we've got Christoph. His pet peeve is like people who like basically talk bad of a tool who have not actually used it. We see that quite a lot, unfortunately. I agree with that one. That's not great. How we can have greater empathy behind the tools. Again, appreciate the context really. That there is different people out there. Some need low code, some need full code. But they all get the job done, which again falls back to what we're saying about picking the right tool. And then learning from each other, again, just being active in the community, really, listening to opinions from podcasts, conference talks, and the likes.
Yeah.
Nice. So interesting,
Cool.
that one. I think like there's probably definitely a mixed feelings around like kind of the frustration. So it's good to see them. So here's an exciting to move into some way of potentially boosting some of these developers and tool vendors. I'm going to pitch this straight to you, Mark. What tool? So challenge 17, day 17. Mark, what tool
Yeah.
doesn't exist that you would love to see?
I think there's been a couple that you and I have spoken about that I'll mention, which is a tool to help share what I'm actually doing in my testing. So not just sort of a dashboard that says test execution, X passed, X failed, that sort of very quantitative, very limited view, but actually some way in which I could show like the richness of a testing strategy, like all the different activities I'm doing, all the things I've learned, and like how that correlates to quality, that sort of thing. I'd love to see a tool like that. That'd be really cool. And then we had talked about another one after we did some training last week about the idea of maybe trying to snapshot queries, database queries, so you could reuse them.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about that a lot this weekend, and actually how that would be. I mean, it'd be really easy to snapshot it, but then how do you make it configurable? Like, how do you then inject your own data in? I have no idea how you do that.
I thought about it as well. Like you'd need to hook into the source code, like relying on
Yeah,
like you would need to have something that basically can read how you're inputting into your DB. So it doesn't care how the data got there or any of the validation or anything like that. To the point
yeah,
where you say, "Here, database, take this." You need
yeah,
to be in there somehow
yeah,
and have it. Or otherwise, you're going to be out of date as soon as there's a release. You're going to have to go and update your
yeah.
all these queries that you've written, and it would just come an absolute nightmare.
Well, I know
Um,
you can actually sort of like monitor queries as they're executed, but yeah, you're still kind of a little bit on the back foot,
yeah.
and and that is like it's literally a read only thing. It's not a create sort of setup.
So
Yeah,
I've got a journey of a tool. Like the first concept of it, right? If I had the money, I would love to build it now, right? And which would simply be, and I'm going to actually mention them because we saw the sad news about Test Buddy the other day, like shutting down. Like
mm,
they're kind of like the start of what I want to see. So it's a bit like what you said, but I want something where I'm actively testing and it's recording all the things that are important for me. So, it's saving my log files. I mean, the last 10 minutes of it in memory for me, just so it's there if I want it. So, got some sort of screen on. I've got my, my charters, my mission, my kind of, rough notes, whatever it may be, just whatever's currently guiding me. And then I'm able to take notes, use lots of shortcuts to grab screenshots, grab videos, be like, go get the logs from that machine. And basically recording basically everything that we deem interesting. Right? There's so many things, but let's keep it short. And then the next bit though would be to start suggesting stuff to me. So be like, you appear to be testing a login form. Have you seen, have you tried these techniques? Have you watched this 5-minute video? Have you seen this blog post? You appear to be doing a checkout. Basically something that's just kind of observing what you're up to and then making suggestions and educating you as you go.
yeah,
That's kind of step one, which again I know would be very feasible if you had the money and the people. And then step two though is to go really beyond that, like the idea of, again, I feel sick when I put them on, but like the VR headset, but basically entering this kind of testing verse, like where you've got 20 screens, right? Not just your one screen, but you're in this world. And like to the left, you can go look at your notes. Like to the right, you've got Jira there ready to update. You've got all the console logs. You've got all your monitoring. You can basically just look around and get all the key information you want. And then the tool that I mentioned before has been replaced by some sort of testing bot, Jeeves kind of thing. Like,
yeah,
remind me what San Francisco Depot is again. And it will just, explain it to you. Take a snapshot of that for me. Record that for me. Automate the last 5 actions I took. Again, it's complete madness, right? But just being able to enter this incredible world just solely designed for exploratory testing, that would be
Yeah,
amazing. That would be awesome.
yeah, I could see that. That'd be very cool.
Yeah,
Like, yeah, having all your actual tool belt, your tool belt, like actually sort of visually represented,
yeah.
and yeah, having some sort of aspect to that would be very cool.
Just like again, like setting little rules. Like again, I can think of like the corner of your eyes, little red light flashing, right? Because you've gone over 10 errors in the logs in the last couple of minutes, right? Just things that it's not necessarily a problem yet, but it's just making you aware of it.
Yeah,
And like I said, I can see all this working on some sort of screen, right? But ideally, I love the concept of because also like again, I'm not a VR techie. I don't really know a lot about it, but like people working from home these days, just being able to just stick on a headset and have all the information and all your
mm,
screens, kind of gives people access to a whole new way of working. But anyway, that's my
yeah,
crazy idea
that'd
over.
be cool.
Um, we have a few in
Well,
here.
500 grand for 2% of the company.
I hope someone's listening and just does it because it's something I'm never going to get around to doing. And if they do it, I happen to know a company that has a lot of awesome content that you can plug into. Um, so, Anne Law again. Interesting. Again, this is kind of interesting because I think there is tools that are starting to do this. So she would love a tool that basically takes some of the checklists that exist. So she mentions the one from MOT about web page functionality, and basically just run it straight away. And I know there is AI tools coming out that claim to do this, and again, they call themselves AI, right? But they're just taking standardized approaches. So Jason
Yeah,
Arbon at Test.ai, he's doing a lot of this. So like he's taken things, I think his case study talks about a shopping cart, and it doesn't care about your shopping cart, it just knows it's a shopping cart. So I should be able to see my products, see how many I've got. I should be able to update them. I should be able to remove them. I should be able to see the price. I should be able to see the tax. I
yeah,
should be able to potentially see shipping information. I should be able to empty the basket. So just general rules that he's come up with, and as an industry we have. So when it comes and runs on your page, it's not gonna fail it. It's just gonna say you don't appear to have this. You do have that. I wasn't able to update my product, or I updated the product and the price didn't change. Like,
yeah.
because they're just standard rules. They don't really need. It's not contextual. Like, if that means it is contextual, but it's not like
It's
really
like
contextual. I don't know what the word is. Like,
contextual fuzz testing, isn't it? It's sort
kind of,
of,
yeah,
yeah, it's understanding the parameters in which you can do fuzz testing. It's actually like it's quite similar to like a lot of property-based testing tools that exist
yeah,
out there, which is that it understands. Obviously, this is done more like on a unit level. Sometimes I've seen a few tools on an API layer, and it's interesting seeing some of the other comments on here. But yeah, if you have, because the problem is what you're talking about there is well, not the problem, but the challenge is that if you do it on a lower level, you just have a data type. So you have certain bounds within that data type that you can mess around with, and then what you do is you have more of it to add that complexity. Whereas, yeah, the concept of a shopping cart is quite abstract, and whilst it does have some rules, there are certain like because there's so many different features that could exist within that. It's understanding what
yeah.
exists and what doesn't.
Yeah.
But yeah,
And
it's interesting.
there's other things I've seen along those lines, like the same vein though, but like they're more standardized, right? Accessibility rules, things
Yeah,
like certain things like that. And I think as an industry, it's getting to that kind of, like baseline of like, if you have a login form, you should have these things as a minimum. If you have this, like it's kind of like minimum standards for doing things across the web. And I think it's probably going to happen anyway, just to make the web, more accessible to everybody, because it still isn't, right? We're in the perfect generation, right? I'm in my mid 30s, but like, we were pretty much the perfect age for diving into it, and everyone following us is kind of in it. But people, there's still a lot of people older, 50 plus, etc., who's it's still difficult for them to grasp, especially if they don't have
yeah.
the support and stuff. So anyway, let's keep going. So Jose, what's Jose coming out with?
Well, yeah. So yeah, as it mentions, let's say similar things around sort of measuring test coverage for API testing, like pulling in open API documentation from like Swagger and stuff, And there are actually tools out there that do that. So there's a Python library. I can't remember the name of it at the moment, but when I was doing some investigation as part of my book, um, I found a few of these sort of property-based tools where you could import a Swagger file or an Open API documentation, and it would actually start generating test cases, but it would generate different sort of scenarios to execute. So those tools actually kind of exist out there. Um, I'd say like something about these ideas that we have to be careful of is like thinking about McLuhan's law, and thinking about how using a tool too far can actually end up biting us in the ass. So it's all really good, like that you can do all of this testing
Yeah.
really quickly, like you can fuzz it, but you still got to process that information. You still got to make sense of it. Like if you've got a bunch of errors, but you don't know like the correlation between these errors, that can actually be quite time consuming. So I think that's something we have to be wary of. Is just because we can do things at scale and at speed doesn't necessarily mean we're going to end up being able to improve the quality of our testing.
Yeah, and I say to add on to that, I think because I've done something similar with that proxy in the past, and it gives me a tons of things that are failing, but I don't know what they mean either. So I'm trusting their documentation to make a judgment call on whether that's something we actually care about. And I remember Alan Parkinson did a talk at one of the earliest Selenium conferences where he tried to automate that, and the rule engine that he built just became so convoluted that it was impossible to get a pass. It was like, ignore this error, ignore that error. That one's valid. I don't care about that one. And he had to, every time he ran it, there was new rules. He was like adding them to the list of things to ignore. And it just became this like beast. I absolutely agree with you. I'm going to let you do Jazz's, Mark, because I feel you've probably got more contextual domain, because I think you're like...
Well, I'm not quite sure what he's getting at here. So tooling to test microservices infrastructure from a component level would be the next big thing. So I don't really know what he means by component level. Does he mean like the components within a microservice? Does he mean like treating each microservice as a component in its own right? So I'm not quite super clear there.
I think he means inside.
Now.
I think he means...
the inside sort of stuff. So I would say that probably that's something I would focus on more in a sort of unit checking TDD sort of perspective.
But I think that's what he means, though, just to be clear. I think he means a framework. Like we have a lot of frameworks for building like UI level stuff and API level stuff now. So where's the next tool that basically is going to auto generate your unit
the problem?
test,
The problem with that, the thing I'm struggling with is that the stuff that exists within a microservice doesn't know if it's deployed on the web or if it's deployed locally. So I don't. What's not super clear to me is like, well, why would we need a tool that distinguishes like in sort of the microservice context and stuff? So I know there's things like monitoring it'd be great start to monitor the performance and view logs, access the variety of microservices components and stuff. I know there's a lot of observability tools out there that do that sort of stuff. As I said, I've been messing around with Honeycomb, and even that's just on the event level, coming in and out of the API, but I find that to be super useful. But I believe you can actually use like heat maps and dive deeper into your applications and see like when this event was triggered, these parts of the system were called and stuff. So again, I kind of think there are systems out there. So it's sort of that's why I'm sort of a bit confused with it, because it's a sort of a case of it feels like most of this tooling exists. It's sort of
I think he clarifies at the end, though. I think a lot of companies roll their own, but I think the problem is, again, like no one writes microservices the same way, right? So like, there's so many different models and different things that you can do within your microservices and integrations with third-party systems. Like it just becomes same problem when we talk about the data issue we've been having. It just becomes this massive thing. But like you said, there is rules that people are following because every company is doing it. It's just,
But I think a lot of observability tools do help with that sort of thing already, because your attitude is you can't second guess, so you go into this passive listening mode, but you give it access to listen to everything, and then the whole point is it more about how you structure your event data to come back to your system to analyze. because you have all this raw data. Now you have to arrange it in a way that makes sense. But yeah, I think it's interesting post.
Absolutely. So we've got Christoph again. Like, I find this one interesting. There's definitely a bit of humour aimed at this one, I think. So a tool that automatically tests based on acceptance criteria. Let's not get into the Gherkin world, Mark, or the BDDings. But anyway, but at the same time, it would have a special feature that would automatically create the right acceptance criteria, the correct acceptance criteria. That would be its magical feature. And we would end up with more coverage and less automation. So I actually get what he's after here. Like, it would be great to be able to. And again, there's an interesting theory and a pattern I see, because I know Alan Page has been talking a lot about this. There is standards that should exist across the web. Like, those standards is not the right word, right? But there's patterns, there's common behaviors. And I think as an industry, I expect a lot of that to get captured. I know I mentioned Jason again, but I know Test.ai are really trying to hone in on this space. And I think Pradeep's Bugzara tool, I think it is, was trying to do something similar with the mobile app space. If you go on a page, there should be a way out of the page. There should be this, there should be that. And again, just common rules that are kind of become, probably some of the things that we don't even notice anymore. Like going back and capturing that and making it kind of a standardized, kind of rule-based, like a community rule engine, like something like that, that says this is why we think this rule is good and here's why it's not.
If I dare just put my BD hat on for a very brief second, though, the point is to capture the core behaviors. It's not to capture everything, and that I think that's crucially it. It's like it stops becoming acceptance criteria if you're listing every eventuality, because it's just a bunch of test cases at that point. I think for a lot of people, because a lot of businesses, they don't care about those fringe bits. That's why they don't think about them, that sort of thing.
Okay, and then finally, we've got Mickey again, who's basically talking about test data creation. I mean, we've just done a few private trainings around this topic, and it's a very interesting space. But I think from this angle, something that looks at your API schema and tries to work out the data for you. It can say that you've got date fields and strings, so it could start automatically generating, different patterns for you. And then, saves a lot of time in correcting test values. So I think there was a Twitter thread about this the other day, hooking up things like Faker to open API specs and so forth. Like all that, again, it's all things that makes perfect sense. It's probably testing that is being done. Like we all look at a schema, we immediately dive into the world, of, we don't call it this, right? Because it's not cool, but we dive into boundary analysis. Like, oh, look, there's a string there. Oh, there's an integer. How big can I make it? How small can I make it? Will it break, etc. And if it was possible, and this is the kind of tooling that I do think we are going to move into. This, and you mentioned that the caveat to it, but this idea where we just point it at some sort of rule engine and just says, it's not about pass or fail. It's not about yes or no. It's purely we tried this and this is what we got. We tried this and this is what we got. We tried this and this is what we got. And then you can kind of, maybe add that as a rule in the future, or say, actually, no, I don't care about that. But I personally do think we are going to go down that, because we waste a hell of a lot of time as an industry, like doing those kind of repetitive, the same checks all the time. Like, I've both joined lots of companies. On day one, you get there and you automate the first 20 things that you've always done, right? No matter what the job is, what the website is, it's always the same 20 things, and you do them straight away. Well, I'm going to make a suggestion, Mark. I think we finish this later, because we have no option really. We've got 6 minutes and still 2 challenges to go. So I'm going to reckon we stop at this, and we will find a time later this afternoon where we'll come back on and we'll do 18 and 19. I
think that sounds good to me.
So in that case, we are going to shoot. We will be back later with 18 and 19. So there's just so much, engagement and like triggering from these questions that, half an hour is not long enough. So, and plus we're trying to catch up for. So.
And we don't do brief, do we?
No, not really. Right. Well, everyone's got opinions. Like, it was one of the things we said in the chat. Respect people's opinions. Right, we'll be back later, and we'll see you all then. Bye for now.
All right. See you later. Bye.